Welcome to the Learning to Die podcast.
I'm Ian Doonican.
And I'm Kieran O'Regan.
How do I live when I know I must die?
We explore areas of philosophy, psychology, martial arts, culture, existential risk, history, society, religion, science, and anything else that seems of interest and relevance to answering that question.
We can only hope that some of what we learn might be of benefit to you too. Namaste, sapiens. Gias Muragwich Accorda, Kehi Wiltu.
Tommy Gumah Makara.
Gahanawa. I spoke to a young kid the other day in the change rooms at the swimming pool, which sounds a bit perverse, but I didn't mean to come out like that. His dad was his dad was getting him changed, you know, in this little kind of cubicle thing. But I could hear the dad talking. The dad was leaning in, and I heard the dad was Irish, you know, like by his accent, and the kid was in there like giving the dad shit. And he comes out anyway, and the kid was going, "Who's that man you were talking to?" And I was like getting changed in the corner. He was talking to me. I said, "Are you Irish?" "No," he goes, "I'm Irish and Indian." I said, "Oh, lucky you, I'm just Irish." And the dad goes, "Oh yeah, his mother is Indian. Like we lived in London, we've only been here for a few years." "I'm Irish and Indian." He kept going. I was like, "Yeah, good for you. Do you speak Irish?" "No." He's maybe about three or 4 years of age, and definitely no more than 4. I said, "Do you want to learn how to speak Irish?" Yeah. I said, "Hen, do, 3, car, kuik, she, shock, ok, ni, je." That's 10. The dad was going, "There you go. Now we're going to teach you some Irish later on today. You want to try that?" I said, "Hen, do, 3, car, kuik, she, shock, ok, ni, je." And he goes, "Pelican," and walked out the door.
What?
He just said pelican and walked out the door. like
the bird?
Yeah, like a rat. Yeah, right, like fucking just random shit. It was so funny. The dad was saying that his mother tries to speak like local language to him from India. And he was this beautiful little boy. Like he was like so like smiley. He was like a cartoon character, you know? And he said his mother tries to speak like her local Indian language to him. And he just looks at her and goes, "What are you saying? I don't understand you." So even though he looks, you know, probably more Indian than classic sort of pasty white lad like me, he's got that little boy Irish humor type, you know, "What are you saying?" Like, it's really interesting. You know, he's got that little kind of Irish cheeky boy type of thing going on as well. So it was quite kind of, it was really funny actually to see him. Right. And, you know, when I counted pelican and just walks off, points his finger, pelican. Like, what the fuck does that mean? I'm thinking. Quite funny. But I've got 3 funny stories for you. So that's the first one. The other one is, did you ever hear like it is? So it's spring here, right, in Australia. And so the birds have been out like chirping in the morning, which is great. Last night we go to bed about 8:45. We go to bed quite early. My wife had to be up early to go away this morning for work, right? She goes west for work within Western Australia. So we had to get up at like 5:45. So I said, "I'm gonna go to bed." The bird, we got a willow tree outside here we got a big willow tree on our verge. And we have magnolia trees as well. I'm like, "What's that fucking noise?" Chirp, 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 chirp. Like fucking birds chirping at 8:45. And it's pitch black now. It's been dark since 6. Chirp, 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 chirp. Like, that fucking bird better stop. Kieran, fuck me, all night. Chirp, 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 chirp. 3 o'clock this morning. Chirp, 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 chirp. And then at about 5:30, about 50 million birds descended onto the willow tree. Fucking man, what a terrible night's sleep I had last night. I might fall asleep during this. Did you ever hear a bird, not a night bird, like a day bird, chirping at 3 a.m.? If he chirps tonight, I'm chopping down the fucking tree.
You remind me of, do you remember the Dunbelievables?
Yeah. Pat Short and like John Kenny.
Pat Short. And there's the one where they're in the hospital and John Kenny has the pellet gun for shooting crows out the window. So he has this BB gun that or is it BB gun or maybe even be like a 22 rifle, and he's just out the window of the hospital inside in the ward shooting crows.
Is that when they had
keeping him
that
away.
sketch called Away and a Home instead of Home and Away? Away and a Home.
Yeah, away and a home. Yeah, yeah.
That little jingle and everything. Yeah, I think you have to be Irish to get that humor.
Yeah, I'm surprised you don't have a gun, man.
Here in Australia, it's probably easier to have a gun in Ireland than it is in Australia.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, speaking of violence, here's one for you. This is my last story before we get into today's episode. So Sunday, the All Blacks were playing the Wallabies here in Perth.
Oh, what? Rugby? Oh my God, I watched the highlights of that game.
Yeah.
For them to go, what is it, 25, 30 minutes in, they get a red card, and then they go on to the tries that the All Blacks scored. It's like they're playing a different game.
Different level. Yeah. It was like watching
they're doing
adults.
something else to everyone else. It's unbelievable.
Yeah. It was like watching adults play under 14s. That's what it was like.
And it was so graceful, so
playful.
Playful. Like they were enjoying, they were seeing opportunities, playing in real time. Nothing scripted, nothing read. Like it was like this. It was unbelievable to watch. Like how they've been playing the last few weeks is.
And as you know, Karen, as a rugby player as well as I am, like when you're a man down, it's like a death sentence. You're 99.9% sure you're gonna lose the game with a man down
for 50 minutes.
Yeah,
for it was at least 50 minutes. Like it was only 20 or 30 minutes in that they got the red card.
It was like they had 17 players against 15.
Yeah,
it was bizarre to watch.
Yeah.
So we went to that game on Sunday.
Oh, you went to it? Cool.
Yeah, I went to it. Yeah, I went to it. Yeah. So cool. I went to it. There was about, I don't know, 10 of us, right? So there was me, my mate Crew, who's a mixture between Scottish, Maori, American Samoan, and Irish. Right. So his granddad on his dad's side is actually like white Scottish, who married a Maori woman, and then American Samoan and Irish on the other side. Anyway, he was there, ex-professional rugby player. He's played in the UK, Canada, USA. Must weigh 95 kilos, 5'10", purple belt in jiu-jitsu. Like that. I call him the Pebble because he looks like the small version of The Rock. So I call him the Pebble. Super nice guy. Crew's there. Beside Crew is my other friend, Elko, who's Dutch. Elko is about 6'2", 95, 100 kilos, purple belt in jiu-jitsu, ex-rugby player, did Koshkin karate. Two guys that Elko works with as well. They're pretty small, but not martial artists. They were just pretty quiet guys. In front of us then, as part of our group, was Andrew, a guy from Cork, the guy who reset your email account. He's a black belt in jiu-jitsu, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, ex-rugby player as well. He's about 5'10", about 95 kilos too. He's got his two kids with him and his wife, Melissa, who's a purple belt in jiu-jitsu and a black belt in judo. And the guy behind me tried to start a fight with us. And I'm thinking, man, like none of us are even drinking. Oh, Elko had a few beers. Oh, there was another guy as well, Bruce. Bruce is about 6'4", new Kiwi guy, but doesn't do any martial arts, but pretty big guy. The guy behind me tried to start a fight with me because he kept spilling drink on my back. So at the very start, when we stood up for the anthems, I went to go sit down. My chair was covered in beer. And my jacket was covered in beer. And I just went, oh, man. Come on. Jesus. Oh, I'm sorry. I said, okay, don't worry about it. Just be careful, will you? Then during the game, little drops of beer in my back. And he's drinking more. And he's with a big crowd. And there's kids with him as well. The big family. There must be 15 of them. And they're all really out of shape as well. Like they're not fit people. They're just hammered drunk, eating chips and chicken nuggets and just fucking food going everywhere. And they're screaming and roaring, like screaming in our ears. So we just left anyway, let it go. Then about 10 minutes into the second half, I feel this big like down my back. I just turned around. I was like, man, can you? I said, for fuck's sake, man, more beer. Come on, I said. Like that, not in an aggressive way, but just like, come on. Jesus Christ. Oh, I'm sorry. He's going. I said, yeah, whatever. Just fucking, can you please stop? Fuck's sake, I went. And I had a Western Force like t-shirt top on. Oh, the Western Force, blah, blah, blah. I said, yeah, whatever. Yeah. Just leave it. Then he kept talking and talking and talking and talking and talking, like for about fucking 10 minutes. Then crew beside me just turned around and said to him, will you just stop? Will you just leave it? Like, just stop. Then he goes, don't pull the race card with me, buddy. Don't make this about race. Now, I ignored him like for 8 minutes. And he just went, don't make this about race. I was like, I said to crew, what's he even talking about? Bear in mind, crew is Maori. Elko's Dutch. Andrew's Irish. Andrew's wife is Chinese Malaysian heritage. And then this guy's talking to me about race. I think he's Indian. I'm not sure. And I'm just like, oh.
This woke shit has.
This guy was about 35, maybe 35, no more than 40. And I was just like, you know what, man, I didn't even open my mouth about race. And this crew turned around and said to him, don't even start this. Like, this is just not. Number one, the point I was going to make today was, number one, people, if you're going to pick on anybody, you should be asking people, and I'm no fighter, like, and I'm not a tough guy, but be careful because you might poke the fucking wrong bear someday. That's first of all I'd say to you. And especially when people
watch out for cauliflower ears.
Yeah. Everybody has been in contact or combat sports. So, you know, watch out for cauliflower ears is right. So for that's the other thing. That's one thing. And the other thing as well is like, what the fuck is wrong with people? You're sitting there with your kids, man. It's like 3 o'clock the game kicked off at 2 p.m. It's like 3:30 on a Sunday. Kids are all around you. What is wrong with people? Men, middle-aged men with alcohol are fucking idiots sometimes.
No, it's self-esteem. It's just trying to be the hard man in front of their family or whatever. And it's just feeling inadequate, feeling like they need to prove themselves, trying to acquire some self-esteem by being the big man. You know, it's rather pathetic. Like,
it's pretty sad to watch. You know? We were just talking about afterwards on the way home on the train. A bunch of us, and we were just saying, like, because we were all like stone cold sober. Mm-hmm. Crew doesn't drink. I don't drink. Andrew wasn't drinking. Elko was anyone had a few drinks. And Crew was like, imagine if you had like got up and just even smacked them, like just not punched him, just smacked him in the face. Like, you'd make him look like a child in front of his family. You'd embarrass him. Like, it's just. But it would just ruin the day. In some ways, like, it kind of did ruin the day, you know? You just think, man, like, who goes to a game with their kids and tries to kick off? It's weird, man. Absolutely weird.
But then we dead curious at what the intention was at bringing up race, because is it that he legitimately thought that someone was pushing back against him because he wasn't white? Or was he fully aware that that's a card he can play socially because he's not white to try and impose some extra power on the situation? So, like, which of those two scenarios was it? Did he legitimately feel that he was being oppressed or pushed back on or marginalized some way? Or did he know that that's a card he can play in our current cultural zeitgeist because he feels if he uses it, it can kind of be like a trump card. Like, it's like pulling an ace out of your pocket in certain social respects because so many people are afraid of being politically incorrect. I wonder which of those two scenarios it was like. Because neither of them would be surprising, depending on the person. Neither of them would be surprising, like, because you see both playing out in our culture. People brainwashed by this woke identity politics nonsense on one side, and the other side, people knowing that it's nonsense but using it to their advantage. You know, so like both of those things play out in our culture, and we can see both. Like,
what's interesting is I didn't even stand up like and turn around and face him. Like, when I just kind of spoke over my shoulder in his general direction type of thing, I didn't even stand up, and I was very cognizant of. I didn't want to be the aggressor at all in any of. And even though he was sitting right back behind me, I was pretty in a pretty vulnerable position. But something in my head and my heart was saying, like, this guy isn't going to do anything anyway. A bit like McGregor, do nothing. Like, I knew he wasn't. What's he going to do? Like, really? What's he going to do? Smack a beer off my head? Like, all right, go for it and see what happens. Like, I didn't really care. I was pretty chilled in the situation, but it was more the verbiage of his mouth. I was like, where has this come from? Because I didn't get up and say anything to him. And for people who know me, they know. If anybody knows me really well, they'll know, I talk a lot of shit. Like, I'll joke around and mess around. I didn't even engage in conversation with this guy. Because when he was going, the Western Force, blah, 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 I'm sorry. I was like, yeah, okay, it's okay. Just leave it now. Just leave it. Like, let's watch the game. Let's all just have a good day. I was going. So I think because I didn't want to be his kind of friend, maybe that's why. But it wasn't because of that. He was just really drunk. And I just didn't want to engage in him. I thought there's no good going to come out of this, like engaging this guy. So that's why I said, yeah, it's all good. Just leave it. And I have no idea because there was nothing racist said. And Crew's a Marty boy guy sitting beside me. Like he's a proper man. Like, like he's a big, like as Crew said to me, I'm a Marty boy. He says, I'm like I'm colored, like, So it's not, I don't know. Anyway, it's weird. It's not like we were all sitting there like white supremacists with armbands on us, It's really odd. Like I had no idea.
Swastikas in your foreheads.
Yeah. But and the other thing I was going to say is that people know me, like I might take the piss, but there's no way I'm racist. There's no fucking way. Like if I think you're a cunt, and that's it. Like it's not got to do with race. It's just straight down the line.
You hate all people equally.
Equally, yeah.
I'm not racist. I hate everyone equally.
Yeah. So this is quite bizarre, though. It's pretty interesting. Like it's been interesting to reflect on it over the last couple of days after us talking about, some of the shit that we've been talking about here. Or it's interesting because you don't really see much of it in combat sports, but it's the people who don't do any of these things or discuss these things or have no experience with it are the ones that want to do it the most. I suppose like people running around, like you were saying with the woke culture, it's always the people. If you look in America across all these unis, it's the people who are not actually affected. They're the ones that are actually calling out. Like just Jordan Peterson said, like, you can't be going to Harvard and calling out against the establishment for, suppressing you. You're going to fucking Harvard. Like it just doesn't add up.
Yeah. But man, I like to err on the side of like Seneca is like all cruelty stems from weakness. It's one of my favorite lines from any of the Stoics. All cruelty stems from weakness. That when people act in a way that's so basically, I wrote this article years ago. I might actually do a new version of it and republish it, but it was called "How to Deal with a Prick," and it ended up being one of the most popular articles on my website for years.
Wait, you gave it to me fucking last week.
Yeah, but basically the premise is that there's basically like three different types of prick. There's the bully prick, where the bully prick is someone who essentially is just the archetypal bully, and they themselves have unresolved trauma that they haven't dealt with, and as a result then they try and manifest some self-esteem by trying to feel a sense of superiority over someone else in the world. So they try and make up for their inferiority complex from here by trying to develop a superiority dominance kind of a relationship over here. So then that's just the archetypal bully, and that's coming from a place of weakness. That's cruelty that's coming from a place of weakness, very obviously. The second type of prick I call the ignorant prick, where the ignorant prick is someone who doesn't even know that they're being a prick. They're just actually ignorant of the fact that they're inflicting harm in the world. That they're annoying other people, or they're that causing suffering or harm in the world. They just don't know. They're actually legitimately unaware of the consequences of their actions and their behaviors. So that's a weakness as well, because it's obviously some kind of a social awareness or social learning issue that they just don't have, that they're not navigating, that they don't understand. So that's still weakness, because it's obviously it's a very flawed way to be in the world, to be inflicting a lot of harm and not even realize you're doing it. And then the third type of prick is what did I call it? I can't remember. It might have been called like the ASPD prick, which is like I just got from the DSM-5 is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual for Psychological Disorders. It's the thing, and in that there's a section on antisocial ASPD, antisocial personality disorder prick. So ASPD prick, which is basically ASPD is the category under which sociopath and psychopath fit. So for when someone is being a prick because they're actually a sociopath or a psychopath and they're getting a kick off inflicting harm, that's obviously also a place of weakness, because they themselves have a problem with their neurology, or they have, let's say, sociopath. I'm not sure the exact definition, but they were socially groomed via trauma into this kind of way of being in the world, this sociopathy that they need to sustain their being, to feel superior to others and to inflict harm and develop this dominance relationship. It's like a really advanced bully. But regardless of whether someone's a sociopath or psychopath as the ASPD prick, or whether they're an ignorant prick, or whether they're a bully prick, all of those pricks are coming from a place of weakness. And all the cruelty that they're manifesting in the world is originating from a place of weakness.
Yeah.
That it's not that. So like, I basically wrote that piece to elaborate on that one line by Seneca, that all cruelty stems from weakness, because it's a very useful. I'm not trying to advocate like passivism and just let pricks do whatever, but being aware that it's understanding. It's just, and then being aware of that. And then what can feed into that then is the likes of being aware of concepts like a lot of anger stems from a place of shadow projection. Then that goes from not from me outwards, but also from others outwards. That it's a place of weakness, that when someone is trying to, and a bully does what he does, or she, or whatever, usually that weakness, that attempt to impose a sense of superiority over someone else, is because they're projecting their own weakness onto someone that they can perceive as a victim, that they can then dominate, as if they're trying to dominate their own weakness.
Yeah.
But it's coming from a place of internal insecurity and fragility, and it's so I find that really useful. And another really useful concept that I think I included in that article, I might actually dig it back up and republish it on the new website, but it was that there's a thing called Hanlon's razor that I never actually researched where it came from or who Hanlon was, but it goes along the line of never attribute to maliciousness that which can be more easily attributed to incompetence.
Yeah.
So it's like that fits in with the Seneca line, because if we just err on the side of, well, okay, this person did something really fucking unpleasant, but if I can give them the benefit of doubt that they did this from a place of incompetence. So like the bully prick, incompetent at dealing with their own insecurities. The ASPD prick is actually socially, they have some neurological issues that they were born with. If they're like, let's say psychopathy is actually inherited or whatever. And then the ignorant prick is incompetent socially, and that they don't even know that they're inflicting harm on the world. So it kind of goes hand in hand with that. But it ends up kind of, I use those a lot for years while I was doing security, to kind of help keep my mind calm in really aggravating situations. When I'd be bouncing on the doors of nightclubs for years, and while in college, and when I first came back to Ireland after living abroad, and they were very handy anchors for me to be able to hang off when, or for me to be able to drop, to keep the ship steady when it would have been quite easy to lose the running things a bit like.
Yeah, I think it's as you're talking there, it is interesting, like where it comes from weakness. Because we've been talking about some stuff this week here at home, and we've been kind of using that everything boils down to power and money. And I think on top of that, or you could add into that, whilst everybody might be striving for power and money, maybe some of the behaviors come from weakness. So what you're saying there is really interesting. Because in my mind's eye, I was going through a Rolodex there of fucking psychos and sociopaths that I've worked with who climbed the greasy pole and got into the positions. And you just think to yourself, like, yeah, you got to that level, you make money and all that, but at the detriment of what? I know people that end up getting divorced. They're miserable fucks. They're just, you know, like in Harry Potter, you have those dementors that fly around that suck the energy out of people. It's like they've been full of dementors. Now they are the fucking dementor. Like, that's what they're like. And you see them, you're just like, oh man, the energy off of you. And you see them burning their personal relationships and other relationships around the traps. And then what's really interesting is when you see some of them get made redundant out of a business. And they're like fucking Gollum out of Lord of the Rings, climbing and slithering for jobs, and nobody wants them. It's pushing them away. It's really interesting to watch that behavior. What goes on.
But it comes from that place of inner turmoil, inner like trying to like the Becker stuff, like we can just keep going back to that. And it's just the terror management theory that it's this attempt to develop a sense of self. This is a modality that was discovered to try and make up for the existence, to try and buffer the existence pains by trying to build self-esteem. And this just happened to be this particular status in a job. Like, how many people do we know between us probably that when they put on their, when they go into work in the morning, they are full of confidence, top dog, they'll act the big man, act the big woman or whatever, and, you know, try and run the show and be the dominant go-getter, fucking type A and all that. But then their personal life is a fucking mess.
Yeah.
And you said their relationships, like you mentioned, and their people, they're just, they can't be, I don't even know how to put it. Like, it's like, where's the, when they're on their deathbed and they're in their last few minutes, let's say they know they're dying, or they get a terminal cancer diagnosis, or they're actually, or they just have a heart attack and having a banger, and they're like, that's it, I'm gone. Like, it's so cliche to say, but what the fuck matters about what level management you had, or if you had a fucking black belt in fucking logistics management? Do you know what I mean? Like, no, none of that shit matters a bollocks when you're just about to return your borrowed carbon to nature. Like, it always comes back to, when you read these things, or these people who've had near-death experiences, like we had Colin on, or we have people who, you read about deathbed interviews with people, and you listen to interviews with palliative care doctors and nurses who work with, and counselors who work with people regularly who are dying in the last few days, last few weeks of life. And over and over and over and over and over again, it just comes back to relationships, people, memories with people, you know. And it's just really sad to watch, legitimately, when these people who just get caught up in the rat race at the expense of the very thing that makes life worthwhile in the first place.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I'll be honest, Kieran, I was caught in that from about 2004 to 2012. I thought that was the way to my salvation, probably. I was trying to do that. And then around, or until about maybe 2011. And then I was like, you know what? This isn't me. This is just isn't me. I can't play endless politics. I can't control other people. I can't just be subservient. I can't go on these social things. I can't do this. And the other thing as well is, if I was asked a question as well along the way, I would just tell the truth. When people ask me what I think, I couldn't be, you know, the company line, or when I saw bad behavior, I call it out, or I clash with people. I just couldn't be everything to everybody like other people can be. I just couldn't do it. And probably maybe because I'm just not smart enough to do it, or just not clever enough to navigate, and some people are. And I'm not saying that every leader is a fucking lunatic, by the way. I'm not saying that, because I've worked for some really good people that are not, that genuinely want to do a good job. But there's a lot of fucking psychos out there as well, you know? And so, yeah, it's interesting. I think everybody's on their own path, and obviously everybody on their own journey. And it depends, you know, what's important to you. For me, those things really aren't that important for me anymore. It's more about the quality of the work, the type of work that I do. It's more about the things that I do in my life, the relationships, like you're saying, the memories. And I think I've had the good fortune of being able to create a bit of space in my life over the last 8 years to reflect on those things and read those things. And look, my pathway into this whole thing was probably true, like I said, the Book of Five Rings from a philosophical point of view, but it's probably mainly through martial arts. The Book of Five Rings and Buddhism has been my kind of way to pry in the side of the box and go, oh, what's in here? And then that's led me on to all these other things where, like, even today, man, like, it's 28 degrees today, right? We've had shit weather, 28 degrees. I was up early, brought my wife to the airport, did a few things. I just went and laid in the grass for half an hour before this podcast out the back, like laid in the grass like a fucking child. Like, lay right down in the grass, sun beaming down, and just lay there for half an hour.
Class.
Like, that's awesome to do that in the middle of the day. Like, how good's that? Like, how good's your life? I was just lying there watching birds fly around. And as much as I was woken up at 3 o'clock this morning by the chirping, I was lying there watching birds, bees, the wind blowing, sun on my face. Nobody was trying to kill me. Nobody was trying to shoot me. Nobody was screaming at me.
That's it.
Nobody was trying to fight me. It's pretty good, like, so, it's interesting.
God.
But it's a good, if you can dig out that story, that might be nice to put up on the website, dealing with a prick, because I'm sure lots of people would like some advice. And I think the good thing that you've articulated there, Karen, is those type of archetypes of the prick archetypes. Like that's, it's not going to solve your problem. But when you see that prick archetype coming along, you go, you're that. You're that. Yeah. That's what you are. That's, you're that prick archetype. Oh, okay. Yeah.
It helps to create a bit of space. Like it helps to create a bit of, like, I think things like that are so useful, especially because it involves emotionally charged situations. Like if someone is being a prick, it's a very strong thing to call someone and to think of someone as in a situation. But when you have these tools to be able to just this conceptual tool to just be able to recognize, and it just creates that bit of space and helps create that gap between stimulus and response that Frankel or Marcus Aurelius talk about, and to be able to just have that all of a sudden to create this bit of space to disentangle the emotional reaction from the more rational, reasonable side of the mind, and to kind of separate it out a bit and create a bit of a gap, and then just to give that moment of pause to be able to think for a second clearly, rather than ourselves react because we are ourselves kicking got about like that. We it's like the mindfulness, like basically it's like a conceptual way of creating a gap to facilitate mindfulness.
So here I'm smiling because what you just said is what I was thinking about, that space between the stimulus and the response. Because I would just be like, wah! I would just fucking bite straight away. I was like a trained dog, just bite onto something straight away. And now I kind of stop. It's interesting you say about the kind of mindfulness angle, because I've been doing this course with Alan Wallace, who's a Tibetan teacher. He used to be a monk. Might have spoken about him before. He trained with the Dalai Lama. And his course is Introduction to Dzogchen. And Dzogchen is a type of practice in Tibetan Buddhism under the Vajrayana school of Buddhism. I think it is, if I get my words right. And Dzogchen basically is, so in Vipassana meditation, you observe the thoughts arising. This is my understanding. So if there's any Buddhist scholars out there, feel free to rip me apart in terms of what I'm saying. But you see the thoughts arising and you note them. In Dzogchen, the precursor to that is shamatha meditation. Calm the body with breathing. You see the thoughts arising, but then you start going to the next level, the inquiry of the thoughts. Where are those thoughts coming from? So this is why I like it, because it's nearly like kind of merging meditation and science together. Where do those thoughts come from? Where are they going? Are they being recycled? What causes and conditions led to those thoughts? Where's the mind? Where are those thoughts going? Why did you think of that certain thing? Like, and so on and so on. Then the next level, Karen, is even freakier, because the next thing you want to do is not only have you calmed your body, you've seen the thoughts arise, you've inquired about the thoughts, but then you go to the next one. Who are you? The observer. So you're observing yourself. And it's really interesting. So it's like nearly on levels. Here's the thoughts. Here's me. And then who am I behind it? It's a very interesting approach. Dzogchen. DZOCHGN, I think it is. Dzogchen meditation. Very interesting. Very interesting approach. It's a constant kind of nerdy mode of inquiry. I still don't understand it fully. I'm doing this course on the wisdom experience. They have a podcast called the Wisdom Podcast. It's Wisdom, the book publishers, and they have an online platform called the Wisdom Experience. So I've probably done maybe 12, 13 hours of it over the last week or so. And but I really like it. The meditation is really interesting. So it's on that kind of helping create that space as well.
That concept of trying to pay attention to the source of attention is one of the most fascinating ways of tying your mind up in a pretzel.
It's
so fascinating. That's what it is. It's like trying to pay attention to the source of the attention, but then to observe you can just, it's an infinite regress. Like you observe the observer, then observe the thing doing the observing, then observe the thing doing the observing of the observer. And you can just keep going. You can just, it's like, you can just, but maybe it's not keep going. Maybe it's just a loop, or like trying to even conceptually map it out is an enigma. But it's such a, it's literally a dissolving way of viewing your own mind.
It's pretty trippy. And you know what's interesting? I spoke to a guy last week, and I'm not going to say the guy's name, but he's done a fair few drugs. He's pretty young. He's done a fair few drugs like LSD, ayahuasca, and so on. And I spoke to him last week, and he hasn't done this Dzogchen meditation, but he's used this kind of nearly framework when he's been off his head on LSD, going, where are the thoughts coming from? Who am I? Who's behind it? And the both of us said at the same time, we've only known each other for a couple of weeks, the both of us said at the same time that we believed that we were actually here. And where I'm pointing to is from the crown of my head, draw a line back out at about 45 degrees. And that's where we think our consciousness is. We both said it. So I've had that experience in meditation. He's had that experience in LSD. And we both went, oh, what the fuck? Both trained in science, both scientists. He comes from a psychology background. I come from a sleep science background. So it's not like we're two fucking acid heads or something, you know, sitting there going, hey man, this is the way to find out who you are. But it's interesting. I got that from meditation. He's got it from doing LSD.
You're after reminding me of your man Alex Gray, the artist.
Oh yeah, I follow him on Instagram. Yeah, I like him. He's got some fucking trippy pictures, man. Yeah.
Yeah, there's one particular one that reminds me of what you said there.
I'll just bring him up here. I might get some of his pictures. Alex Gray. I like Alex Gray. Sorry. He's building a church, isn't he?
Yeah, the Hall of Sacred Mirrors, or the Chapel of Sacred Mirrors, or something it's called. Cosm.
That's his website there. Yeah. Might have his picture here. We'll click on art and see what we can see.
Yeah, I'm looking here, and I can't find this one image that he has of like something coming in the back of the head. It just reminded me of it there, the way he described it. It was gas. Might have been Alex Gray actually, but that's the gas. I've never had that experience, but it doesn't surprise me that kind of and what was that perception that made you think of that? Like, what was it? Was it a feeling of what would being in a meditative state and watching yourself from behind? Or was it a feeling of being able to actually see the back of your own head? Or was it, the images in your mind? Or was it, what made you think that this 45-degree angle?
None of those. It was actually on a different plane of reality, if you want to call it that. It wasn't on this plane. If you want to call it the earth and plane, it wasn't here. It was in a different level. It was, I think you might have said, do you remember when you spoke about doing DMT and you spoke about infinite shades of gray and this kind of sense of this oneness and being somewhere?
Yeah.
It was in that same space. And I've had that in meditation. It was in that space of like being everything and nothing. It was there. Mm-hmm. It was like, and I think this may be what Musashi is talking about when he talks about the void or emptiness.
Void, yeah.
It sounds like it's nothing, and it sounds like it's bad, but it's actually everything. And that's where I think that's where it was, and it was quite, quite interesting. I can't explain. It wasn't like I was sitting on a meditation cushion and I could see myself like a near-death experience that someone says like, I was floating on my body and I was in the corner of the room watching everything. No, it wasn't like that. It was on a different plane of reality. In pure blackness of the void, the thoughts were arising like thought bubbles, like a cartoon, moving from my right to my left, and they were just disappearing and just going away. And then another day, the thoughts were actually like a Zen Enso, just going around in circles. But when they were going down to the bottom, they were burning and going on fire and coming back up.
Cool.
Yeah, it's pretty weird, man. I'm nearly kind of going more away from doing psychedelics by doing meditation. because I'm afraid. Not afraid is not the right word. I'm having so many good experiences meditating.
Yeah.
And I feel so good every day from doing it that I feel like I'm fucking microdosing nearly every day. I feel like I'm slightly.
Yeah.
Do you remember when you said about for after doing DMT, you felt like everything was in slow motion? The world was all like kind of like jelly and weird, and you could nearly feel people's feelings walking by you.
Yeah, not necessarily like jelly. It was almost like there was a different. It's like I was kind of observing the world through a different lens, a new lens. Like everything was just. There was more. There was more richness to the world. Like the whole thing came alive. Everything, the sound of birds, light, music, food, everything was more alive. Everything.
Yeah, that's so. I had that after silent meditation retreats. It's like that, but not as powerful as that. So if that's 100%, I'm on like 20. And I feel like that every day. Like last year, if I had that birds issue, which I did have last year, I was going ballistic about the birds in this house last year. So we just moved in. This year, I'm getting up going, oh, I love the sound of birds. My wife's going, what the fuck? Just shows you changing your mind as well to a situation. A bit like what Seneca and the Stoics say, you know, it's up to you if you want to get pissed off by things. Yeah. And that was like on Sunday as well. I think on Sunday, if that guy had said something to me like that, especially when you pull out the statement about the race card, I probably would have turned around and just fucking smacked him in the face about a year ago. I reckon I would have actually. I would have just went, you fucking prick, and smacked him. Out of pure anger because he was insinuating I was being a racist. So I probably would have just smacked him. And then what would have happened? People would have said I smacked him because I was a racist anyway. So I would have been fucked. But so yeah, I feel like I'm kind of like on this slightly microdosing feel good level every day. It's really good actually. It's really nice. So I'm kind of on the side of caution about not doing psychedelics because I'm afraid that I might bring in some dark energy or something mightn't go right, or I might disrupt my practice. Or maybe I get launched into the new world. I don't know. At the moment, that doesn't feel right. So I'm going to just trust my gut and just keep meditating.
But when it doesn't feel right, there's never any like rush or need to do it. Like you might never do it again, or you might do it 1,000 times.
Yeah.
You know? So it's whatever, wherever your curiosity kind of leads you, you know? Because I think Chris, in that book, Chris Leatherby has talked about what I've read thus far. He has many times mentioned the crossover between insights gained and experiences described from meditation practice and psychedelics, and the way that meditation practice can actually enhance psychedelic experience going into it and enhance the integration process afterward. So it's because and he references in it the likes of Huxley and Alan Watts and how they essentially became curious in the psychedelics world because there was mirrors in there from the kind of mystical world, from the likes of from meditation-based culture like Buddhism and Hinduism, etc.
Yeah.
So, and when you listen to insights, like there's a really interesting field of neuroscience called neurotheology, and it was founded by this guy Andrew Newberg, who he himself is the
neurotheology.
Neurotheology, yeah, it's the neuroscientific exploration of religious experience. And there's a particular paper. I probably did, yeah, because I just found it so fascinating. There's one particular paper that's like a case study paper where they described the brain states that they could measure. I'm not sure the tech that they used, but they measured the kind of neurocorrelates that they could measure in Sufi mystics who were chanting, Franciscan nuns that were chanting, and Buddhist meditation practitioners that were meditating. And then looking at the description that those people gave of their experiences when they could get into these trance states and the language that they used. So it's a really fascinating field. It'd be actually fascinating to talk to a researcher from this area. This is it, Andrew Newberg. There he is.
No, this is not. This is a different guy.
No, if you go back to the previous page.
This one. Yeah,
Buffy Saga.
this is a Radio Lab or some NPR.
Yeah, whatever
It's
that
back in
NPR. If you see
2010.
there,
Yeah, yeah.
if you scroll down a bit,
Yeah,
if you
Dr.
scroll
Andrew
down a
Newberg.
bit, yeah, so Andrew Newberg, yeah. So there's a particular paper where they, so anyway, yeah. So with those states and the descriptions that they have given, the Sufi mystics, meditation practitioners, Franciscan nuns, what they describe is this sense of unification and loss of self, and unselfing is a word that I come across in this kind of domain. It's that it sounds just like many of these kind of psilocybin experiences or DMT experiences. And it's not surprising because, like, even when I had that DMT experience, I was able to experience the same thing. Like, the DMT only lasts in your system for a few minutes, yet I was able to experience the same journey for about 5 or 6 days afterwards, if I remember correctly. I have to check my notes, but it was 5 or 6 days afterwards at nighttime, multiple times a night. I'd be back in that horrendous terror tunnel, and I'd just be in there, and I'd be asleep, and all of a sudden I'm in this terror tunnel, total loss of sense of self, and then need to come back to an absolute surrender in order to get through and to burst out the other side. And then it's all the good stuff. And then other times I'd be curled up in a ball. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, curled up in a ball, knowing that if I turn over on my back and open myself up fully and actually lie down, open my arms and legs out to the side, that I was going to go back into the terror tunnel. I just knew if I turned, fuck it. And I was lying there going, shit, fuck, here we go again. Terrified. Yeah, it's like I'm lying in my bed like at nighttime in a fucking Wednesday night or whatever in fucking Cork, and I'm like, if I turn over my back now, am I going psychotic? Is this going to last forever? Is this going to? I remember thinking, am I going to be doing this for the rest of my life? Like, I remember thinking, and I go, fuck it, man. You made your bed, fucking sleep in it. Here we go. Right, turn over, surrender, lie back, and then boom, back in the fucking tunnel again.
Like
horror, fear, dread, terror. Awful, loss of self, total, no memory of existing, just pure fear, terror, dread, all wrapped up into one thing. And then the capacity comes around eventually to then be able to surrender fully. And then upon, paradoxically, managing to surrender, like getting myself to surrender, which is a bit of a funny paradox in there as it is, then breaking through some kind of a feeling of like this membrane of dread and terror and horror, and bursting out of this tunnel, and then infinite fucking geometric patterns made of love that went on forever in every direction. We're only on the other side of absolute total surrender to what scared me more than anything I've ever experienced in my life. And that went on sometimes multiple times a night for 4, 5, 6 days. Like Sunday night, Monday night, Tuesday night, Wednesday night. And that was long after the DMT experience. So that means that the neurology that we have is capable of doing this independent of the substance. So it's not surprising to me when these mystics and these meditation practitioners are describing similar experiences, because our neurology, even from my own personal experience, is capable of generating this experience independent of the substance.
Kieran, you know I love to quote an old lyric of a song every now and then, like I do probably on most episodes. You know, the day destroys the night. Night divides the day. Try to run, try to hide. Break on through to the other side. Break on through to the other side. Do you think that's what was happening? Do you think maybe that's what that song is about, and what happened to you and what happens in meditation? That we are breaking through to the other side. And do you think that other side is where we're going when we die? I
actually have, I don't have, so prior to me having that experience with the DMT, I've done lots of death meditation. I've talked about this in a different podcast with the one with Colin I mentioned, but I
got a story on death meditation in a minute. Go on.
Yeah. So I learned one of the things that I was given by a friend in preparation for that DMT experience, which, just to preface, and I feel like mentioning this again, is that it was one of the most important experiences in my life, yet I might never do it again. Like, I feel like there's that all, because I'm in a state where it's kind of like, what was it? Who was it? Alan Watts that said, like, when you've got no, it wasn't Alan Watts, Terence McKenna, maybe, when you got the message, hang up the phone. You know? So like, it's like that. But it was like, and it's serious fucking business. It's not something to be fucked around with. But so I was in, one of the things I was given was this description of the experience, and a guy who's from what he said anyway, was very experienced with different forms of NN and 5-MeO. But one of the things he mentioned was that it feels like you're dying after you smoke the pipe. And I remember thinking at the time, what the fuck? How could this fella know what it's like to die? Like, how many people have died, come back to life, and then also smoke DMT? Like, I wonder what the subsection of the human population is.
That Venn diagram, yeah.
Yeah, like, what's that Venn diagram? People that have legitimately died and come back to life, and those that have actually smoked 5-MeO DMT. Like, what's that crossover? So Venn diagram is the way of putting it, yeah. So then, but I was like, all right, fuck it. This fella sounds like he knows what he's talking about, and I've already been told that surrender is the key. So from a facilitator, so I just kind of kept the death meditation and just ended up meditating on phrases similar to surrender to death. Was like a kind of a mantra. That was the kind of tone of it, like fully surrendering all control, all resistance entirely, even to the point of dying, even to the point of death. And this is what I spent a week or two on that in specific, and even swap that in place of my normal meditation that I was doing at the time. And then when I actually did the experience, just after hitting, or did the ceremony just after hitting the pipe, it actually does feel like, I was like, there was actually a kind of a familiarity there that was really strange, a kind of like a deja vu, kind of a familiarity to the experience. It's like, oh yeah, this is what dying's like. And then there was just, it was just before going in, ending up in this terror tunnel, you know? So there's this, but I don't know, I'm very unwilling to make any claims or assertions on what is going on, other than kind of what the lowest variability explanation would be. Because the likes of Alan Watts, I have essays from his writings from the 1960s, 50s, etc. And to him, the idea of, they didn't have, for example, things like neuroimaging. So now we have neurocorrelates and potentially causative mechanistic stuff going on with the default mode network and the parietal lobes, etc., that are involved in, we know from very strong correlates in neuroscience to be, like, from neurotheology or the study of psychedelic experience, to be involved in the loss of self and the loss of boundary between subject and object, and the kind of sense of unification with the environment, and etc. That these are parts of the mind, parts of the brain that have apparently quite strong neurocorrelates. If I remember correctly, it's like the right parietal lobe, and also the default mode network involved in the sense of self. So I just err on the side of, there's neurocorrelates here, but at the same time, these are things that are turning off, rather than just kind of like, the key things seem to be that things that are turning off and getting out of the way, rather than turning on and getting us somewhere. So it's almost like, while there are neurocorrelates, there's also, maybe these are, because there's a reality to biology that we've discussed many times and you've experienced in meditation, where there isn't a part of the mind we know of where there is a fixed chiron that is stored, that moves across time. Like, this is one of the 2,500-year-old Buddhist teaching, is like the 3 marks of existence. Like, everything dies, impermanence is the way of nature. Everything, like, there is no self, and everything is in flux. And those 3 things fit together, especially as it relates to the human condition, where there isn't a fixed me. What I think I am is a fictional story my mind is telling itself, because it's evolutionarily useful to keep the mammal alive, for it to feel like, because it needs to propagate and eat stuff and mate, etc. but there isn't a fixed me. There isn't an entity that is me, that is stable and immovable. Everything is constantly flowing. The biology that's generating the sense of me is in constant flux. Like even like here in Cork, they have the APC Microbiome Institute, where there's they can do fecal microbial transplants and take human feces from clinically depressed people and give it to mice, and the mice are germ-free mice, and the mice behave like depressed people. They'll go off and socially withdraw, or they'll have other behaviors typically associated with depressed people. So if in that kind of scenario, if it is possible for certain forms of depression to be influenced by the gut microbiome, how can that person who is in that kind of depression, how can they say that they are depressed? What are they? Are they the neurology that's interpreting the neurochemical milieu being partially influenced by the gut microbiome, or are they the microbiome as well? Or are they the emergent property that is a story the mind is telling itself based on a complex interaction of information processing from all these different sources, including the forms of microbial strain in their gut that are generating the kind of neurotransmitters and inflammation that's affecting their brain states and mood, etc. So whatever we think we are is an illusion, but it's simultaneously the case that we need to live as if in the world, we need to live as if we are agents that are responsible for our own path. So there's a paradox even in existence itself, where we simultaneously are on a functional level free agents, but on a more literal descriptive level, what we are is like more akin to a leaf being pulled down a stream. Like the conscious mind, like all the decisions I make, whatever my sense of self is, even to call it a leaf is even absurd, because a leaf is at least something that's fixed to a certain extent. It's still in flow and flux. But so I suppose what I was getting at there is that it can be simultaneously true that there are neurocorrelates that seem to very strongly and mechanisms, that neurochemical mechanisms that lead to these states. But at the same time, or seem to describe these states, but at the same time, it's also true that everything is literally connected. That there isn't any, whatever we think of as a thing is actually a process, because everything is in constant flow, including the sense of self. So everything is, I'm more err on the side of like, that's why I've been so fascinated with it. I've been getting into your man Spinoza, and because everything is inextricably interdependent and connected in a way that sounds, and this is not in some kind of a hippie way, but in a very literal descriptive way. Like these trees out here, these plants outside my window, they need the carbon generated by the mammals and the cows and myself, and as a mammal, and vice versa, and they produce oxygen for me. But then neither myself nor these plants can function without the sun, because we need the sun's radiation. But then the earth wouldn't be where it was if it wasn't for inanimate objects in the solar system that hold the earth in a Goldilocks zone of orbit, that's not too warm, not too cold, away from the sun, to facilitate life as it currently is. So like, where can I say that I stop in a very literal descriptive manner? Where can I say that I stop and these trees start, or me and these trees stop and Mars or Neptune or Venus stop? Because if it wasn't for those planets, we wouldn't be held in the appropriate orbit to even be just the right distance away from the sun to get enough radiation to not cook, but to not freeze. So like, everything is a constant flow. There isn't a sense, there isn't a self, there isn't, in a very literal descriptive way, and everything is inextricably interdependent all the time. And whatever we think of as a thing, including the self as a fixed entity that is immovable, is just an illusion. It's a story. Everything is a constant flux, a process that is constantly in change, and constantly changing and flowing and turning into something else. So when you ask that question, it's like, what is the other side? I don't know if it's possible to think of as a binary, like in terms of a description of reality, because from an experiential sense, it feels like bursting through some membrane when kind of totally surrendering. But that might just be parts of the brain shutting down that get out of the way, that are storytelling parts of the brain, essentially, not in a literal way, but they're the parts of the brain that allow us to feel as a fixed entity, without which we wouldn't be able to survive and maintain our biological function, because we wouldn't be interested in eating or sleeping or mating, etc., and the species would just die off. But it's those parts of the brain getting out of the way that then allow for the recognition and the embodied understanding of inextricable interdependence with everything in the universe.
So I probably would describe it there as, like you said, a tunnel, or I would describe it as a bridge. So I've been probably trying to describe it in terms of, like you were saying, binary. Like there's here and there's there, and you're breaking through, you're going over to the other side. But what you're saying is that there is no other side. You're saying that when you take these substances or you do meditation, it's basically like, oh, I've removed the blinkers to see this other part of the reality that we live in.
Yeah.
And it's just basically like dropping the curtains and going, oh, fuck.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like the Wizard of Oz.
Yeah, but it's like the recognition. It's the removal of blinkers is a good way of putting it. It's like, or it's almost like the parts of the mind or brain or whatever, the biological the things that are, it's so hard to even put words on this, but essentially the parts of our, let's say, from neurocorrelate brain that are essentially getting in the way of understanding and experiencing reality as it actually is, which is constant flux and constantly, absolutely inextricably interdependent flux, where it's everything is constantly flowing. It's like that Heraclitus line that I quote all the time, where it's like no man ever steps in the same river, because he's never the same. It's never the same river, and he's never the same man. Everything is in constant flow all the time, and these states, I can't help but feel, allow us to experience that by, as you said, kind of dropping the curtains, and the curtain being the parts of our biology that are evolutionarily useful at perpetuating the species, but are not useful as it relates to understanding our position and station within reality with a capital R, which is, it's like, and this isn't me being like mystical in terms of making claims that are like supernatural or whatever. Like this is an actual, this maps on with a scientific understanding of the world at the level of physics, biology, whatever you want to say. There isn't a place we can say where something is a fixed entity ever. Everything is, even at any level, biology, like nothing, like any of these, something looks like, even if I take an inanimate object like this pen and just say, well, this is a thing, and to call this a thing is kind of to insinuate or to understand it as a fixed object, and that is useful as it relates to understanding this pen as a tool, but in reality, the components of the atoms that make up this pen are constantly changing. There's water vapor in the air and chemical residue on my hands that are facilitating the degradation of this pen, and it's rusting and it's degrading in a way that is very slow. It's too slow for us to see in real time.
Yeah.
But this pen isn't a fix. This pen is actually a process, because it is in constant flux, even if we can't see it. Whereas, as a way of functionally grasping reality, it's useful to think of it as a thing. But things don't exist. Because to call something a thing is to insinuate that it is a fixed, immovable entity. I don't mean immovable in terms of like moving it around. I mean in terms of that, in fact, it is almost like a snapshot or a photograph.
Yeah, but that goes back to what you said there, Karen, is that, like, if you think about the framework you said a few minutes ago, one, that's impermanent, right? So it's been built and it's degrading. So it's got a cycle, it's over. Two, it's interdependent. It's people go like, oh, that's man-made, that's natural. Well, everything is natural, really, because we're getting resources out of this natural world to make it. It's not like we get fucking shit flowing in from Pluto every 2 weeks to make a pen, right? It comes from this earth. So that's interdependent.
But even humans, the carbon that I'm made of, and the carbon that you're made of, and the carbon that life is made of, is originated from a transmutation process from countless exploded stars.
Yeah.
So like, even if we were importing things from Pluto, that's still natural as well. If we were if we were to start doing mining projects on fucking asteroid belts,
which they're looking at doing already. That's in I have a degree in mining engineering, and that's what they're looking at already, is mining in space.
Yeah. Space miners.
Yeah. And the last thing then, Kieran, or there's a show about that called The Expanse. The last thing then is the last thing then is so you have impermanence, interdependence, and then influx. That pen is constantly changing, right? Which is linked to all of those. So those three things are interesting. Now we're on the verge of going down a fucking 100-hour rabbit hole here. And this leads in, there's all tangents off this then. What is actually the mind? Who are we? But one thing I want to say is you spoke about like being in the Goldilocks zone and all that. So you see all that, right? And you hear all that stuff. And then you try to rationalize that and go, well, that's just a set of circumstances and events that happen and led us to be here today. How unusual. Yeah, how fucking unusual is that? Like, what's the chances of that being real? That's how we became about. And what's the chances of a God making us? To me, I would have said the scientific one was like 99.9 a year ago. And now I'm like 50-50.
This is why I think you will get a kick off Spinoza and Spinoza's take, because even with regards to science, is that like what a lot of people don't, I think, what I didn't really grasp with science is that science is essentially, because science is it's orientated toward, when science is actually done well, which I'm very Popperian in my view on science, which is the attempted creativity is a part of it, but it's like a conjecture is just an opinion, but it's an opinion formed with inherently incomplete knowledge, because we only ever have incomplete knowledge. And then we generate a conjecture, and then if that conjecture is a good explanation and that it's low variability and it stands to reason, in terms of it describes a situation, but you can't easily change the variables, then you can attempt to falsify that conjecture or refute that conjecture with experimentation. So, and the more strongly that we attempt to falsify our idea or refute our conjecture, and if that idea manages to withstand refutation while being a good explanation, then we hold that as transient truth for now until future evidence emerges to the contrary.
Based upon the set of variables that we use at the time in that specific condition. This is the problem we have when we start talking about biology, though. And other sort of ones, other sciences like this. And I know everything is fluid, but particularly in biology, people assume that because it happened for this person, happened for the other. Classic case in point that people can talk about is diets. You got one guy shouting on the side of the fucking street about paleo diets, how it solves everybody's problem. The other guy across the other side of the road is screaming about vegan. The guy in the middle goes paleo, fucking collapses right by paying his guts from eating too much meat. And the guy down the road goes paleo and then wins a marathon. There's so much variability. Because straight away, even if everything is equal in terms of their diets, and they're males and they're 30 years of age and the same weight and the same height and the same ethnicity, every person is different internally. There's too many variables. So you can never come out and say this one diet. And when you look into science, into the papers and the data, and I've been guilty of publishing like this as well, you'll see data on 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80. Like we had a paper accepted last week with 88 people. And it's about shift work and sleep. And we describe the sleep habits. We say like, a shift worker sleeps this amount on day shift and this amount on night shift and this amount on days off. But we're not accounting for the variability, really. There's some standard deviations, but everybody's so different. It's really... So you're caught like between two worlds in terms of you have to publish lots of people's data in the scientific community to want high numbers and high data points, which is good. And it's good information and it gives you an idea of what's going on. But for the individual, we're trying to look at two different people. There is so much difference between too much people. So those set of conditions are always variable as well, as what I'm saying.
Well, sorry, you froze there for about 10 seconds. So, you got it just after you said we're not taking into account variability is where I lost you.
My point really is that humans are so variable and everything is so variable. So like you're saying, we know the truth as it is now based upon those variables. But if we repeated that experiment today, the time is different. There's different circumstances, the weather, the wind, like whatever it might be. There's always, there's no absolute truths, I don't think. I don't think we can go, well, that's it. And that's the way it's always going to be from now on.
Oh, yeah.
It's what we know at this
uncertainty.
point in time. And that might change in 10 minutes.
And the only absolute truth really is that there is no absolute truth. You know, is it's like there's an inherent paradox. It's uncertainty is the only certainty, or the maintenance of uncertainty. The avoidance of certainty is the only thing we should be certain about.
This is
there's
my
kind of a paradox.
Yeah, this is my main criticism of religion per se, or the Catholic Church, or Christian teachings, if you want to call it that, collectively. Whereas as a scientist and being somewhat rational, I would think, is that you're always looking for advancement or improvement or testing ideas. That's why I find it really hard to go, oh, the Bible is perfect the way it is. That was written.
But I think what happens is there's conflation. So this actually feeds back in, and this is where I think a lot of science and religion can actually meet and reconcile, is where, so what I was trying to build toward a minute ago around science was that science works because we're trying to find out where we're wrong. But the reason we're trying to find out where we're wrong is because we have inbuilt epistemic humility, because of a concept that I couldn't find a name for. So I gave it a name, which was the axiom of the infinite unknown. And that's what science is actually built upon. I'll make that claim that that's what science is built upon. And what the axiom of the infinite unknown is, I wrote an article about this for Sigma, is it describes the epistemic relationship between a single person and all possible knowledge that has ever existed or could ever exist in the universe. And there's obviously an asymmetry there. And and there's the possibility that even if there might even very well be information that if a human had access to, they wouldn't be able to understand anyway, because there's nothing necessarily built into the laws of physics that we know of that says that a human is capable of understanding whatever there is to understand. There may very well be things that our mind just isn't capable of navigating. And maybe eventually we'll be able to build computers, etc., to make up for this stuff, but whatever, there's still, it could be a lag time between things we encounter and our capacity to actually understand those things based on the limitations of our meat computer, whatever you want to call the brain. So like the axiom of the infinite unknown, and this actually stands to reason literally when you look at science as a chain of, you're trying to build causal mechanistic reasoning and essentially like domino effects of this causes this and this causes this, etc. And there's a certain flaw to that, obviously, because everything is interdependent. But at the same time, you can look at causal mechanism and find it useful and make it useful, because if it wasn't, then this tech wouldn't work. The GPS wouldn't work. General relativity wouldn't have been able to let us know that we needed to change the clocks in space and satellites, or else our GPS wouldn't work on our phones. You know, like if it wasn't for general relativity, our GPS on our phones would be wrong 10 or 11 kilometers a day, because time moves differently where the satellites are, because the gravity is weaker. So what's underneath science, even if you go back to something like the Big Bang, like science is actually built on top of, and this is where I think the difference comes between science and scientism, where scientism is kind of a view on what exists in the literature is what exists in reality.
Yeah.
Whereas what science is built on as science as the study of nature, is that nature itself is inherently unreachable in terms of determining the origin of it. Because let's say we go back to the Big Bang and we actually determine, okay, not only was this the Big Bang, but let's say someone like Lawrence Krauss is right. And these people that think that let's say their description of reality is correct in terms of that these atoms or these molecules at a quantum level can generate themselves into existence. So let's say that this is how it works. I don't understand Lawrence Krauss's argument, obviously precisely. I'm not a physicist, but let's say someone like him, or do you ever see that picture of the self-drawing hands, M.C. Escher's drawing of the two hands drawing themselves into existence with pencils?
No.
Do you ever see that picture? It's wicked. It's just two hands curled around each other,
drawing
each other into existence.
What's it called?
Let's say that the self-drawing hands, or the drawing hands, M.C. Escher, E-S-C-H-E-R. Let's say we determine, or physicists, I'm not going to put myself in that category. Let's say physicists determine what are the actual particles that can bring themselves into existence? So then they say, oh, well, look, something can be created from nothing, and there doesn't need to be let's say, some kind of a deity or God or whatever. Yeah, this is it. Cool, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, wicked. So let's say there's a particle that can draw itself into existence, right? What's underneath that is the simple point, is another question, because there's always the possibility for a thing before the thing, which is why we can never be certain about anything. So even if physicists get to that point, there's always the possibility that, well, not even a possibility, the question still stands. What gave rise to the order that from which something could generate itself into existence? So that question still stands. And then if that's determined, then there's another thing before the thing. Well, what gave rise to the thing that could give rise to the thing? So infinite regress sits underneath every aspect of reality at the deepest level.
Well, so, that's like what we spoke about with the meditation thing. Like, who's observing the observer? It's the same thing.
Yeah. So like it can simultaneously be true that science can generate, and I love science. Like I've written extensively about it. I am a scientist. I love it. But at the same time,
sounds like you don't believe in Jesus. Sounds like you don't believe in Jesus to me, Kieran.
But science can't get to the ultimate answer. You know, it allows us to understand reality. But what science does is it facilitates the development of propositional knowledge. It facilitates the development of knowledge that I can transfer to you. So I can explain a mechanism of how something works and transfer that knowledge to you. Whereas religion fucks up when it makes claims of a propositional nature about reality or about nature. So when religions make claims about the creator of the universe and starts taking literal interpretations of biblical texts and literal descriptions of certain gods or deities or prophets or whatever, as if they are definitely this particular thing, that's a propositional claim that delves into the world of science. Where science fucks up is when it makes ultimate claims about reality that cuts things out for sure, without we understanding that science itself has blind spots, because science doesn't delve into the world of non-propositional knowledge. But religion is like a pathway, these mythopoetic stories, like the Buddha, Jesus, Lao Tzu. These lads weren't they weren't trying to say, you know, to make literal descriptions. They were like, as soon as you, like the opening of the Tao Te Ching that we've talked about is like, the Tao that can be named is not the eternal Tao. I have a copy of it back there. I can read the first couple of lines. Like, and in that, the Buddha itself was all about experiential knowledge, experiencing the void, experiencing the immortal void. That's why the meditation practice was so important. Like, and the Jesus character is like a way to live, to experience divinity. It wasn't until later that it became a dogmatic set of stories that were definitely true descriptions of reality. It was later, hundreds of over time, that was like forced upon. This is delving into the world of propositional knowledge, making knowledge claims about reality of a literal sense, not a metaphorical, mythopoetic sense, that are like a way to live, to experience reality or experience divinity, and to be living in a sacred way, let's say, in some kind of union with nature. And so this is where religious people fuck up, when they make these arrogant, dogmatic claims of certainty that dip into the realm of propositional knowledge. And science fucks up when it disregards experiential divinity or experiential sense of union, as if it's just something that's nonchalant. Because people who make those claims from a scientific perspective, they themselves, I can't help but think they themselves forget that science is built upon an unreachable answer. Like, science works because it's infinitely humble, because it's aware that there's infinite regress flavored enigma underneath reality itself. And that's, I think, what can reconcile science and religion, if religious people drop the dogma around propositional claims of the structure of reality and recognize their own religious indoctrination as simply another culturally different flavor of metaphorical pathway to orientate towards an experience of divinity. That's why the Sufi mystics I mentioned earlier on, this Franciscan nuns, the Buddhist meditation practitioners, 3 different religions, all describing the same experience with the same language and having similar neurocorrelates. It's because they're just different paths to the same place. Like all roads lead to union.
Rome, I totally agree, Karen, and that's exactly the feeling I've been getting from meditating consistently over the last number of months. Is that we are all on the pathway to the one, whether we acknowledge it or not. We are, and what's the one? The one is us. Like I had this fucking crazy vision the other night, where when I was meditating, I was looking into and these are just random things that happen. Now, I could be fucking clinically insane. I don't know, but these are the things that happen. I'll talk about them. And maybe I will get carted off in an hour or two anyway. I don't give a fuck.
It's only a matter of time before you're black bagged by the Democratic People's Republic of Western Australia.
No, Kieran, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the government of Western Australia for keeping me safe from the deadly coronavirus that lurks outside our doors every day. And to quote some of the Victorian government officials, the coronavirus is an insidious virus that will get you no matter where you are. If you think you're at home and you're safe with your family, it can get into your homes when you're watching TV. That's what they said. Anyway, I would like to thank the government officials for keeping me safe, because I know that politicians are some of our best medical experts in the world. So I'd like to thank them once again. Politics will trump science every day. Now, I know that science trumps religion, and politics can now trump science, and politics is the new medicine of the developing nations. Fuck me. Anyway, what was I saying? You got me caught there. Now I'm tense. What was I saying? Right, we had a bit of an IT issue there. I was talking about the government. However, this is a short book I'd highly recommend if you can get your hands on it, lads. George Orwell, Notes on Nationalism. I picked it up in a shop. I don't know where I picked it up. It says Planet Books. I don't know where the fuck Planet Books is. I have to Google on where I picked it up for $2.50. I don't know if that's American or Australian or Canadian. I'm not really sure. Anyway, it's only about, it's 51 small pages. Like that's a small, like A5. You fit in my hand. It's tiny. Read it now, lads. I can see if I can find one. Maybe it might be a PDF online. It's pretty interesting in our current climate. So yeah. Anyway, I just thought that one there, and then also as well, the Tao Te Ching. As you said, Kieran, that first few lines of the Tao Te Ching. I think I have about 3 copies of the Tao Te Ching. I always see copies of it. I love it, and I just pick up one. Tao Te Ching is one of those books you don't have to read cover to cover. You can just pick it up and go to any page and pick out a quote. The Tao that can be told. What?
There's some kind of timeless wisdom on every page. It's like cracking open Marcus Aurelius or something. You just crack it open and there's something there for you.
For sure. And just exactly what you said a few minutes ago is the Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao. The Tao that can be named is not the eternal name. Like there's heaps of fucking mind benders in it like that.
Yeah.
Anyway, we're going to close out this episode. I know, Karen, you've got a quote for us or a piece of reading before we close this one out.
So I think this quote kind of reminds me maybe how to set this up is that when Einstein was asked once, at least once anyway, there's a famous time he was asked about God. And he said that he believed in no God but Spinoza's. And Spinoza was a guy in the 1600s who is a fascinating character because I've only gotten into him in the last month or so. But there's some people who reckon Spinoza was the first atheist to ever write books. But then there's other people that reckon he was just like a mystic, where he was kicked. There was a Jewish-born lad called Baruch Spinoza who ended up getting kicked out of the Jewish community and eventually ended up hanging out with some kind of Dutch Christian mates and changed his name to Benedictus. But he had a kind of a type of I might not do this justice now, but this is a kind of a low resolution explanation of he understood the kind of infinite regress problem underneath descriptions of reality, where you can just keep asking, well, what came before that, and what came before that, and what came before that, etc., etc. You can just keep going. So he ended up providing an explanation for, or a kind of a solution to this, where he just said, well, there was at some point a thing that could bring itself into existence, because if not, then existence wouldn't exist. So whatever that thing was that could bring itself into existence, whatever was the first thing, the first process, the first entity, the first whatever, let's call that God. That's God, basically. Yeah. Whatever the thing was. But then that thing is then pervasive across all of nature. So he had this phrase, Deus sive natura, which means God or nature in Latin. So he used God or nature with a capital N interchangeably in that sense. So what he saw is the kind of God that he described wasn't one that was an intervening God that had a will like a human and had this, it was outside of nature and intervened in the world because of our prayers, etc. The way he kind of described it, from my understanding, and as I said, I'm only getting into this, is that everything in nature is made of God. That God and nature are interchangeable, that it's one type of substance that makes everything else. And whatever that substance is, God or nature, there we are, look, ethics, God or nature. And whatever that substance is, he actually called it substance, is what everything is made of. Yeah, there we go. A substance is prior to nature, and there we go. Yeah. So I'm still getting into, he has his own kind of specific use of language, like substance and attributes, etc. That he have very precise meanings to. And I'm really interested in what his kind of descriptions were, and I need to actually buy his direct book, The Ethics, this kind of masterpiece he wrote. But so Einstein was asked once, what's the deal with God and your belief in God? And Einstein had this line, well, I believe in no God but Spinoza's. Because Spinoza's God kind of gets to the bottom of the infinite regress problem, but he doesn't buy into the idea of there being this God that you can pray to and is going to interfere in nature and answer your prayers by interfering in nature. He kind of bought more into the idea of a God that is nature, and that it's up to us to live in alignment with nature, not for us to ask for nature's help.
I am a Spinoza's now. If you're a disciple of Spinoza's, call it Spinoza's. I'm a Spinoza's.
Yeah, and there's an element of it that's very Stoic as well, because so much of Stoicism is about living in alignment with the Logos.
Yeah,
with the Logos in Stoicism being like the way of nature, which is very Taoist, and Taoist being the way. So like there's this parallel there between Taoism, Buddhism, Stoicism.
Yeah. Very much.
And Spinozism, whatever you want to call it. Is that
Spinocism.
It's this awareness, it's this view of reality where it's up to us to live in alignment with reality, not for reality to alter itself to what we want, or to pray to some big daddy to change reality for us. So with that, there's a quote I really like from Einstein, because our discussion started off talking about aggro and conflict and
pricks.
There's a line here that Einstein. So Einstein wrote this to someone who had lost a child, if I remember correctly, and he sent this in a letter to someone who had lost a child. And I'll finish with this. A human being is part of a whole called by us the universe, a part limited in time and space. He experiences himself, his thoughts and feelings, as something separated from the rest, a kind of optical delusion of his consciousness. This delusion is a kind of prison for us, restricting us to our personal desires and to affection for a few persons nearest us. Our task must be to free ourselves from this prison by widening our circles of compassion to embrace all living creatures and the whole of nature in its beauty.